For Or Data, the operating system in modern media, this is the Quarter Hour with a special live episode today talking about what ARN do next for Sydney and Melbourne breakfast on KIIS. And joining me today, I'm very pleased to say, is our first ever co-host. Please welcome Max Munday. Hello, Max.
Hello, Wade. How are you?
I'm great, mate. Thanks for joining us. You're our first ever co-host on the Quarter Hour.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, tell everyone a bit about yourself. You don't currently work full-time in radio, but I know you want to. So tell us what you get up to now.
Oh, well, look, I have 3 podcasts at the moment, but my favourite one is, of course, the radio industry one. I have Biz Audio, Biz by the Water, which is a sporting podcast, and Biz Politics, which is focusing more on the current political scene in Australia.
Beautiful. And you've done some work experience at ARN, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. In December last year, I had the great honour of working alongside Kyle and Jackie, of course, not long after they
right.
separated. But it was a great, had a great time, spent about a week there with all different people behind the scenes, on air, and awesome experience.
That's great, mate. Well, and best of luck with your journey I know you're trying to secure a radio job, and hopefully you have a long career ahead of you. And the reason I've opened up this co-hosting spot is specifically for people like you, people who are less than 2 years experience in the media, who don't currently work full-time in the media, but would love to work in radio particularly, or audio or podcasting, or in media generally. So hopefully by creating a platform, we can get some more co-hosts in, we can give some more up-and-come talent, lucky break. And you never know who's watching, Max. Sometimes that happens, or is listening. All right, let's get to the subject at hand. We put in a really interesting chat in our P1 WhatsApp group. So if you're not a P1, thequarterhour.com, it's free for the first month and then $15 a month after that. All you do is you go on there and you can talk about anything you like to with radio. And I posed the question, knowing we were going to do this episode, about who you'd like to see on Sydney and Melbourne breakfast. So I've got a lot of those responses I'm going to go through in our conversation this morning. But Max, no pressure at all, but why don't you help us make a decision? Now you're in the hot seat. Who would you put in to say, let's start with Melbourne. Who would you put into Melbourne breakfast on KIIS?
Oh, I'm going with Hughesy and Kate. Look, I think that for KIIS 101.1, it's been not neglected, but there hasn't been a lot of attention focused on KIIS 101.1 for a while, and I think they need a big name I think they have a chance to start fresh, and I think that Hughesy and Kate would be a really, really good chance to jumpstart the station again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll talk more about Melbourne in a second. Have you got any thoughts on Sydney?
Look, I think they're going to have to stick with Mikey. I would love to see Mikey and Emma return. Look, that would be my all-time favourite, but look, if Jackie O does return to Today FM, then I'd love to see Emma get back together with a Mikey on KIIS.
So maybe Jackie goes back to Today, Emma goes back with Mike on KIIS. All right, nice. Good start. Good start to kick us off. If you've got any comments and you're listening or watching live, please feel free to drop them in the chat on YouTube or Insta, and we'll have a look at those as we go. Okay, so here's my thinking, Max. I think that basically before you decide on who, you've got to decide on what. What is it you actually need? And I actually think ARN have got themselves into a situation where they've got 2 different problems to solve. The Sydney one is a defensive problem because until GFK tells us otherwise, there is a large QM audience still listening to KIIS 106.5 in the morning in Sydney. So I think they need to find a show that existing audience would like, and they can retain as much of that QM as possible. Now, they're never going to be able to retain the same numbers as they do with Kyle and Jack. That's a given. But if they can honestly retain half of that QM, most optimistically 2/3 of that QM, that might be really optimistic, then I think they're on the right track. So I think they need to play more of a defensive play strategically. And to me, a defensive play is really asking, what would the existing QM that are already there really like as a quote-unquote replacement for Kyle and Jack, even though no one can replace Kyle and Jack. So I've got a couple of names in mind. Now, there was some industry speculation yesterday around Karl Stefanovic. And there was a report in the Australian Media Diary by Steve Jackson where he made the bold claim that he believes a memo of understanding has already been signed between Karl and ARN for Karl to join ARN post his Today Show contract ending at the end of 2026. Now, interestingly, that doesn't say which station and it doesn't say doing what. He might be signing with his podcast. He might be signing to do special projects and bits and pieces. Would he do 5 days a week on breakfast on KIIS? I'm not sure. And if you did go with Karl, who would you pair him with? Because I feel like he would need somebody around him. I'm not sure like a Karl and Sophie Monk works. I don't know what you think of that, Max.
Yeah, well, look, I think that Sophie Monk is great. I love Sophie Monk, but I think she's really good as a fill-in host. But as someone for full time, I'd have to go with someone different.
Someone different. Okay, cool. I think also, like, if you build an ensemble cast around a personality, I'm not sure Carl is the right one. He's a good ringmaster and he's a good anchor, but if you think about what Kyle brought to that show, it was more than just that, obviously. And I'm not sure Carl Stefanovic does that for me. Here's a combo that I'm going to throw out there that I actually think could work. I could hear this with a lot of work behind the scenes first. I would take a punt on Lowy. I think Lowy, from his style, would actually suit Sydney breakfast where he absolutely would not have suited Brisbane breakfast. But I'd have to make sure that the ensemble cast around him delivers in spades on lots of things. One on storytelling, one on real life. Also being able to hold Lowy to account. Lowy is a great solo operator, and I think his strength is he runs the show. That's a strength for him where he is now. But when you're getting up in the morning at 4:20 a.m. every day, I think you need a little bit more teamwork and a bit more camaraderie. So the pair I've sort of put around Lowy are Lauren Barry from the Hot Hits.
Oh, yeah.
I think Lauren is really missed on breakfast. I think she would be great on breakfast again. Whether she'd want to get up early, no idea, but I think she'd be great. And I wonder if Cooper Johns comes back in that scenario for a bit of Sydney, a bit of sport, because I think a Lowy and a Cooper are quite different, and a Lauren kind of in that sort of mix. And Cooper, the rumour is he had a falling out with Kyle. That's why he sort of came back for one day this year and left. Not sure if that's true or not, but I wonder if he would come back. So what do you think about Lowy, Lauren and Cooper?
Look, starting with Lowy, I got to say, he's doing an amazing job. I love the whole digital aspect of it, the live stream. I think it's a great idea. Lauren Barry, of course, is doing really well on the Hot Hits. And I got to say, I would love to see Lowy come to Sydney breakfast. I think Brisbane's, of course, as you said, a different sort of market. But I think Cooper Johns as well. I think I would love to see something where, like in Gold, they have Alex Cullen doing the sports report, and like he did on KIIS, of course, Cooper Johns. I'd love to see that. I think that's a really good prediction.
Okay, cool. All right, well, that's something just to throw into the mix there. All right, so that's Sydney. In Melbourne, I've gone a completely different strategy because the strategy in Melbourne has to be attacking. There's Cume and Share up for grabs. They have to go after it. And if they get the right well-known names, Melbourne names, local names, early, they might have a good chance of recouping some of that lost audience pretty quickly. So here's who I've gone with out of Melbourne. I think Jules Lund is a strong possibility. I think he would do it. I think he would be a great get day one. You know what that show is going to sound like with Jules on it. I wouldn't be surprised if Jack Post's name comes into contention. So he was with Christian, obviously, with Hamish and Andy. I wouldn't be surprised if Jack is sort of part of the mix in there somewhere. And maybe a Lavinia Nixon. Jules and Lavinia have worked together before on air. They've got a good chemistry. Lavinia left her job at Channel 9 at the end of last year doing the weather. She still does some weekend presenting, postcards and the like. Some other options for Melbourne. I think Jane Bunn, who is the 7 weather presenter in Melbourne. I've seen her live host an event. She's great live, really good. Break her out of the auto queue, and I reckon she could add some really good brightness to a Melbourne morning, particularly through winter. A couple of other names, because we know that Melbourne revolves around 2 real pillars, comedy and footy. I think there's a couple of comedians that could come into the mix. I really like Sam Taunton, who was on The Project. I think he's very much undervalued as a performer and a personality. I reckon he would do a good job and seemingly has the muscle to come up with stuff every day, which, I know you get a lot of help behind the scenes on The Project, but a lot of it still is up to you in terms of writing and performing. And maybe Dave Thornton. Dave was a fixture on Fox for many years. I'm not sure if he'd want to do it again, but that's someone I thought of as well. So any thoughts on those ones?
Look, I totally agree when you say they need a comedian there. I think that the bigger team, the better. I would love to see Jules Lund return. But yeah, look, it's a complicated one because as I know off air we were talking about Tony and Ryan, but we didn't think that they were going to switch over to radio. And I know both of them previously worked at ARN. But yeah, I think that anyone who says that it'll be Tony and Ryan, I think that they'll stick to podcasting. But it's difficult because Jason Lauren, of course, there's no way they're going to come back to KIIS. You've got Christian O'Connell on Gold. You've got Triple M. You've got all those different stations. You've got Fox. look, it's a really difficult one for Melbourne as well because KIIS has always, for the past few years, been really down there. So I totally agree with Jules Lund. I think that'll be a really good one. Whether as we get some of those other ones like Jane Bunn, I would love to see that as well. I just think we need some new talent in Melbourne.
Okay, yeah, good call, good call. Some people that haven't been on the radio as well would be great.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at some comments from the WhatsApp, because in the P1 WhatsApp group, I posed this question the other day. We've got lots of good comments in here. Let me just see, because sometimes people want to be anonymous, so let me just make sure I'm not outing anyone here. All right, so we've got Pete says Chrissy Swan on KIIS 101 Breakfast.
Ooh,
and
okay.
Mike E for the interim on KIIS 106.5. And if and when Jackie signs to 2 Day, maybe Emma goes across with you, similar to what you were saying, Max. Look, I'm not sure on Chrissy, Pete. I think a national afternoon show, look, to be honest, any show or contract where you don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning through winter, I think is instantly appealing. So you then have to overcompensate that with money. And I'm not sure ARN have got the kind of coin that they would need to lure someone who's currently contracted with another network and doing well in the afternoons across to a morning shift. But thanks, Pete. Gav says, do we think KIIS will be renamed again? Maybe not immediately, but in 12 to 18 months' time. If ARN licensed the name from KIIS in LA, as was reported when they launched, it might be an expense they could save on. I'm not sure the KIIS brand without K&J has any inherent value in Australia. That's a good call, Gav, because I wonder if it was a net negative in the long run, particularly for Melbourne. You could probably rename it and not a lot would change, but Sydney, it pretty much is attached to Kyle and Jack. So there we go. Who else forgot? Oliver says, I might have missed a news story a while back, but what happened with Mike E and Emma? I think what happened there, Oliver, was that I think from what I can see is that SCA wanted Emma as part of an ensemble that was already existing, in that case, Jimmy and Nath. So there probably wasn't room for Mike. But now, look, Mike's doing well on KIIS for now. So whether that stays longer, I'm not sure. Spencer, g'day Spencer. He's saying that the Australian has quoted the Karl Stefanovic story. That's right. And maybe with Carrie Bickmore. That's interesting, Max.
Ooh. Yeah, I actually did read that article yesterday. Look, I think National Drive, as you said, anything that doesn't include waking up at 4 a.m. is very appealing. So I think National Drive on the Hit Network, I think Carrie Bickmore will stay with Tommy Little.
Yeah, I think when you're getting good money to not get up at 4:30, that's sort of how that rolls. But you never know. Look, you never know. Some people might see the attraction of, I don't know who would want to go next after Kyle and Jackie O, to be honest, but the attraction of the challenge and go, you know what, I think we can do this or I can do this.
I think keeping Brooklyn on is I think it's a good way to sort of retain some of the listeners or keep a sort of familiar voice on the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with that. What else have we got here? Stephen says, why would ARN put Carl up against Christian? Doesn't make sense. It's a good call, Stephen. We've got Lucas who says he likes Carl's podcast, good interviewer and actively listens to his guests. He's already got some reasonable size audience on there, so that's really interesting. Who else have we got here? Carl and Kyle was a suggestion because they're good mates, so that's interesting.
That'd be expensive, yeah.
It would be expensive, yeah. Good call, Max, because the bottom line is going to really be part of the equation. All right, let's quickly just check to see if we've got any other comments that have come through. We've still got people listening on and watching on. People are quietly listening, enjoying. Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm just checking the comments to make sure. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, the best way you can contribute is go to thequarterhour.com, become a P1, join the WhatsApp group, and we'll keep the conversation going. You can do that today. First month is free, as we said. Hey, Max, thanks for joining me. 15 minutes goes quick, right?
Very quick, very quick. Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate that. 15 minutes is still longer than most talk breaks you'll do ever on commercial radio, so just remember that. Unless you're in the Kyle and Jackie O show where you could go 30 minutes. Max, all the very best of luck for your career. Stay in touch on the socials, and if anyone's looking for a great person who is really interested in getting into the biz, then Max is there. You can check out his stuff. What's your Insta handle, Max? We'll give you a plug.
At MaxMunday13, and on there I've got all the links to the rest of my 50 other Instagram accounts.
Excellent. Mate, you keep going. Entrepreneurial mindset is really much needed. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Max Munday there, who was our special guest co-host. So if you know someone who would like to co-host the Quarter Hour podcast with me, all we're looking for is people who are up and coming in the industry, who have less than 2 years experience, who really, like Max, love audio, love radio, maybe doing a bit in podcasting, but want to jump on, then you know where I'm at the quarter hour on Instagram. All right, well, that's our quarter hour. Keep the conversation going. Be really interested to see what happens with ARN, KIIS and Sydney. And I've written an article today on LinkedIn, so just find me on LinkedIn and you can find some more thoughts from me there on the whole thing. Back on Thursday with a very special guest. We have a finalist from the Australian Audio Awards, someone who hasn't done a radio interview in a while. We'll be talking to them on Thursday. But for now, dear listener, that's been the quarter hour. See ya.